can you tell me a bit about Cisco to start with?
Yeah, so obviously Cisco has been around for over 25 years now, actually. I think it might have even been 30 years. But it grew up as a infrastructure company, started out doing big software-based routers, and then evolved into switching as networking moved from just pure routing into switching as well. And for that past 25 years, they've had a strong focus on anything infrastructure, and obviously as time moved on, moving into wireless as well, and then as that kind of environment became more commoditized, they started to move into more adjacent areas as well. So they do things like they own WebEx, and they do lots of unified communication, so IP telephony. Obviously, that all comes together. So the intent is to be an IT solutions provider for customers. They can come and go, okay, what do I need to kit myself out? And they can go everything from the WAN connection all the way through to the phones on their desktops and get everything they need from Cisco. On top of that, we also cover security as well. Probably for the early years of security within Cisco, they focused around firewalls, and that was very much embedded in their switching and routing teams. Over the last few years, they've started to realise that we need to get serious about security. We need to have a definitive strategy. You can't just go in and sell switches and routers and say, hey, you need some firewalls to go on the edge of your network. The threat landscape has changed to such an extent that you need to be a lot more sophisticated in your approach to security these days, rather than just thinking you can put a firewall on the edge of your network and that's going to keep the bad guys out, or in combination with antivirus on your desktop. That just isn't working anymore. So a couple of years ago, Cisco started on the road to a strategy of wanting to become a security advisor as well to the customers that they've been used to providing the other IT infrastructure to. They moved the security products that they had into a definitive business group around security, and then started to define a proper end-to-end security strategy and said, okay, this is what we need to do, this is where we're going, what else do we need to fill out that strategy, not just go and make a land grab and buy a bunch of security companies that have already done a good job of that. And I actually came from SourceFire, which is a company that specialised in next generation IPS. We actually started out 12, 13 years ago as a follow-on from the Snort open source IPS. So many of you may have heard of the Snort open source IPS, open source project that our founder Marty Resch created back in the late 90s. Similar model to the Linux open source model. He created the core engine and the rules that are used to do the traffic inspection, and made that public domain in an open source using open source methodology. But he soon recognised that he'd sort of done that as a bit of a science project, and he recognised that there was a lot of business value in that technology from a security perspective. So he founded SourceFire and set around adding context to that. An engine that just inspects traffic will create a lot of noise. It will tell you lots of events that it's matching on the traffic that it sees going through the network. But in a big network, you could have thousands of events a day, which as a security analyst team becomes very hard to analyse. So he recognised if you had context, which is understanding what's in your network, what's the destination of that traffic, you could do a much better job of kind of pre-filtering those events. You still record all the events that trigger, but you can pre-filter them and go, okay, these are the ones that are, really matter to you. A piece of traffic came in that triggered a rule that was maybe attacking a vulnerability in an Apache server, and we know this is going to an Apache server, for example. We would put that as a high priority. Okay. If that happened to be going to an IIS server, we'd go, okay, we'll record that. It's interesting that we saw a piece of malware that was attacking an Apache server, we'll record it, but we'll deprioritise it. And at the end of the day, what you find is less than 5% of the overall events are ones that you really need to care about then. So as a security analyst team, trying to secure a reasonable sized enterprise, you probably go from thousands or even tens of thousands of events to tens or even a few hundred events, which is a lot more manageable. A small, modest team can do a very good job of being proactive about managing the security in their environment when you start talking about that many events. So SourceFire grew up into an industry-leading position after around 5 or 6 years. Gartner Magic Quadrant leading, great reputation, great threat-centric focus, and then started to broaden from that a bit, not just around IPS, but starting to look at advanced malware as the threat landscape started to change. And maybe 12, I guess 18 months ago now, Cisco, as part of broadening out their strategy, said, okay, we need to do something about advanced malware. We need to start getting threat-centric. This whole approach of trying to use firewalls that used to work, when you could just say, this is the edge of my network, I can put a firewall here and build effectively a big perimeter, a big wall around your assets. The attackers have figured out how to bypass firewalls when they need to. If there's a focused attacker, they can go straight past the firewall. We kind of have a saying, when was the last time a firewall actually stopped an attack? Firewalls themselves are good for access control, they're good for segmentation, they're good for making it harder for attackers, but they won't actually stop an attack. So Cisco recognised they needed a threat-focused approach, so they looked around at what they needed to do and what could they do themselves. And they did some things themselves, but they also saw that companies like SourceFire were making big inroads into solving that problem, in trying to keep up with the almost exponential rate at which the attackers were becoming more innovative and more ingenious in the ways they were launching their attacks. So that's when SourceFire became part of the Cisco Security Business Group last year, and that's kind of, we're rounding out that story now. We're taking that threat-centric approach and integrating that across the products that Cisco already had, that were usually more of those kind of perimeter gateway products, so firewalls and also web and email gateway products, and giving them that intelligence, that understanding of what the attackers are actually doing, rather than just saying, if there's something trying to come in through from a website or through an email or through the network in general from the outside world, if there's any file in there, have I seen this before? Do I know it's bad? The previous approach has always been, if I didn't know it's bad, it must be good, I'll let it in. These days the attackers are so sophisticated, they're so good at hiding, obfuscating their code that they put into the files that are coming into the network, that things like signature-based detection just don't work anymore. They can't keep up. The attackers are continually moving on in the way they hide their code. So signature techniques are always behind the curve. I mean, in theory, they always were behind the curve, because you always had to have one person got infected and then you got a signature and that protected everyone. But the pace at which they were moving meant that kind of worked. Now it just doesn't work. And when you're talking about targeted attacks, the attacker has spent a lot of time figuring out how they're going to first off, figuring out you're a worthy target for whatever reason. You've got some valuable information, some intellectual property, or maybe it's just for some grudge reasons, but they've got some reason to want to get into your environment, and they'll do a load of homework and they'll figure out how to bypass what security you have. And even some other even things like IPS technology, they'll figure out how to get past those with something new that they've created, some new vector that they're using, which will enable them to get in. If you don't start treating things that come into your network as everything's suspicious until I can prove it's good, rather than everything's good because I didn't know it was bad, you're going to be in trouble. We see this constant stream of very large organisations ending up in the headlines, which is kind of proof, because you got to think all those organisations are doing their best to secure themselves. They're trying to put the best technology in place, or they have done, and they've got good security teams and analysts that are trying to keep the bad guys out. But we kind of see it as you just need to change your approach. If you change your approach to being this more sort of suspicious approach to new things that you see coming into your network, don't just assume if you don't know they're bad, they might be good. Yeah. So that's kind of where we are, and that's where our focus has been. But that's what I spend a lot of my time doing, going out talking to groups at conferences, just about this change in the problem. And some of it's an education thing. It's understanding why are we seeing organisations like Target in the headlines? How is this? How is that happening? And we call it the industrialisation of hacking, but it really is the hackers have gone from being individuals. We all know it's way past teenagers in their bedrooms, but it's a whole ecosystem out there. It's not just groups of cyber criminals. They share their intelligence. They have specific individuals that do specific tasks and just sell that on the darknet. So someone will spend their whole time looking for vulnerabilities in software, which if you spend your whole time looking for vulnerabilities in software, it's quite easy to find
Yeah,
vulnerabilities in software, which
Yeah.
is, you know, a lot of the challenges that we kind of have today. I know we were going to talk about mobile, and I think that's where we see, you know, that's one of the big things that we see as far as mobile being a new vector. When you haven't been used to writing your software necessarily in a way to be that secure, when you've got people who spend their whole time looking for vulnerabilities, you know, you can guarantee that they're going to find something that can be the next successful way to penetrate multiple organisations. And the guys who do that, they share it. They effectively sell it, so that becomes their sort of their currency in the, you know, in the criminal underworld. So they'll sell it to guys who spend their time then taking vulnerabilities and turning them into exploits, and they'll develop the code that make them an exploit. And then further up the chain, there's guys who write toolkits that pull all the exploits together in a toolkit, so you just get a nice little menu-driven system that you can use when you've decided who your target's going to be.